Hi everybody, good morning. This is Jean here. I'm coming to you from my front room. Not a tutorial today. I just wanted to share with you something. As you know, if you've been following along with me, you will know that I really don't like having unfinished projects. It's not that like I'm fanatical or OCD or anything like that about things. I just think I've spent a lot of money and time doing a certain project just to have it put away, because maybe I've gotten tired of it, or I've grown bored, or I've just lost interest, lost my mojo, and I'm like, I don't love it. And over my quilting journey here for about the last, I would say, 12 or 13 years, I think I've put away maybe 5 or 6 projects. One of them, if you remember, was my Joseph Coat of Many Colors quilt. I really, oh, my glasses, my glasses are so foggy. I really didn't, you know, as you know, that whole story was like I started it, it was too hard a pattern, I finished it. Anyway, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, so what happened was, I had gotten a quilting magazine, and it was in, I cut it out, I cut out the pattern. It was the quilt magazine, we're in America here, it's called Quilt Sampler, and the quilt magazine was on, it was the spring-summer 2016 issue. Now, and this is the pattern that I saw, and for some reason, I think the spring-summer issue comes out like in January or something, so it was literally 3 years ago to right now, like to the day, that I got this pattern, and let me show you. Hopefully that will be in. So it's a very graphic, very modern, very green, gray, blue, sort of, you know, modern, large quilt. Here's sort of the layout. Hopefully you can see that. I'll put some pictures up. And here are, yeah, here's the instructions for this quilt. Something that I don't know why I was attracted to it, because I don't usually do stuff like that. I like roses and pink, you know that, you know me. And I'm like green, gray, and blue. But I know, big quilt, big honking quilt, right? So I thought, how big was it? Oh yeah, 90 by 100. I've made king size quilts before, so I wasn't daunted by the size, and I've quilted king size quilts. So I thought, I'm going to make this quilt almost exactly like the pattern, or like this pattern shows, like the picture shows. I really like that. And usually I don't do that. As you know, I'll put my own spin on things, but I'm like, hey, it's been done. Like, why don't I do it, right? So I did it. So I made this, I made the quilt top. I made the quilt top. And as I said, I don't shy away from quilting. As you know, as you've seen, I've quilted large quilts on my little home sewing machine. But for some reason, I made this quilt top, and I folded it up and I put it away just a few years ago. And maybe it was because it didn't appeal to me. I don't know why I made it, because it was a lot of fabric. And I did a good job piecing the top. Well, in my making of my elephant abstractions quilt, I was searching for things. This is about a month and a half ago. I was searching for things in my sewing room, and what do I come across? I come across this quilt top, and you know me, like, oh, finished is better than perfect, you guys, gotta make your quilt, gotta finish your quilt, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not doing that, you know, my quilt's sitting there, my quilt top is sitting there, and I was feeling like, Jean, finish the quilt. So I got a whole bunch, I ordered from Connecting Threads a very wide backing fabric. Again, as you know, I mean, lately I've been getting this wide backing fabric. I understand it, why. I understand why. You don't have to see this stuff and whatever. So I've gotten this green and blue to sort of coordinate backing fabric. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to quilt this thing, right? Well, as you knew on my Elephant Abstractions quilt, there's a tremendous amount, my quilt's here, my elephant quilt's here. There's a tremendous amount of negative space. This gray is just gray, just plain. And I really was in a quandary as to how to quilt it. I thought, well, I have my quilting stencils. I like my quilting stencils. Do I do feathers? Do I do a geometric? Do I do lines across? And I remember thinking that ages ago. Well, I got it out, and I was still thinking the same thing. And I was tired. And I thought, I don't feel like wrestling that king-size quilt, which I don't love, and quilt that whole stinking thing. So what did I do? What did I do, folks? I did a little bit of homework, and I sent my quilt out to a long arm quilter. Never have done that before. Quilting by check. And I thought, I looked around. I won't name some of the companies, but I looked at them. I looked at their, their how they do it, the time, whatever. But for somehow, I was directed to somehow through a Facebook page, a chap in Missouri. His name is David Hurd. I'm allowed to have a shout out to David Hurd. Quilting by David. Have any of you heard about it? He's a guy who quilts. He has a beautiful long arm quilting machine wherever in his home. And I got in touch. Nice website, Quilting by David. I got in touch with him. You fill out a form and then you send him your quilt. And you pick out your pattern. He supplies the batting. You obviously send the quilt and your backing to him. He'll iron it for you. He wants it as small as possible. So I sent him my quilt top with my backing, which was a hefty package. And he will quilt my quilt with the design that I chose, which I collaborated with him when I spoke him on the phone. And he says to me, well, when do you want your quilt? And I'm like, I don't know, 3 years ago. No. He says, well, when do you want it? And this was about maybe, let me just tell you, this was about the second week of January, maybe the first week of January. And I thought, well, maybe in February sometime. He said, oh, okay. So I thought, well, that's like a month away. Well, it's not even February. I got my quilt back almost a week ago. It was like done in a week and a half, right? So I'm thinking, so you're probably asking, how much did it cost? How much did it cost? How much did it cost? King size quilt cost, including the backing, including the batting, and including the return shipping, which was almost $20 for him, and the batting, which was almost $25 or so for him, $156. I thought, oh my word, that is so cheap. It's not cheap when you say it like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money, when you could have done it yourself. But I'm thinking, so it comes up to like about $120 or so without the shipping and the batting, which I would have had to have done anyway, the batting. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? To do this quilt. So anyway, I sent my quilt out. Now, here's my quilt. I've received it back. It hasn't been bound. I'm going to bind it. And I'm going to give it probably to one of my sons, because one of my sons was like, oh, could you make me a really modern quilt, like in like a dark blue and maybe a splash of green? modern, minimalistic. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'll make you that quilt. And here it is, right? So here's my backing, which is like a green and blue, right, to go with it. And here's my large quilt that it looks almost just like the picture. And I will show you some close-ups of the actual batting that David Hurd, this lovely gentleman in Missouri, did for me. We settled on, I spoke to him by phone. After looking at the website, he has hundreds of patterns, like wonderful. And I really wanted, and you can't really see it up close, but I really wanted a graphic look. So we settled on Baptist diamonds. I think that was what it was. So here is my quilt. It's massive. It's huge. I'm going to go bind it, probably with maybe a dark gray. Like I said, look how big it is. I can't even get it in the frame. Right here it is with this bright lime green. I liked my piecing. I did a really good job, but I understand it now. No, I've understood it before, why people send things out to the long arm quilter, because it's precise and it's wonderful. And I was looking at that thinking, did I sort of wimp out, because I can quilt on my home sewing machine, but I thought the lines that I wanted, these graphic abstract lines, I know how to do lines. I've just done them on my elephant quilt, but what a pain. What a pain to have to do that on such a large quilt. As you know, I really like my feather quilting. I like curves. I like to free motion quilt. And this was set up on a long arm machine, and it was done in like a week. The guy's amazing. I know a lot of places when you ask it, it could be months out, their timing. So I was so beyond thrilled. And I said, I'm going to give a shout out to David Hurd, Quilting by David. I am beyond impressed with his craftsmanship. Obviously, one of my boys came in, I think it was Jean-Pierre or Francois came in, or somebody came in and said, oh, it looks like it was done on a professional machine. I'm like, well, it was. I could not have made it so lovely and precise. And for this quilt, that's what I wanted. And with my, obviously a computer generated long arm, I believe he loads it on, and or if he does this by pantograph, which is like he follows the pattern, it's still very precise, and I couldn't have done it. And I thought, I enjoyed piecing this quilt. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the colors. I really did. I enjoyed piecing it. I think I did a good job, just flying geese. And I really enjoyed it. And I didn't want to mess it up because it was a large quilt. So now that's my thing. I just wanted to tell you that he said, oh yes please, if you are looking for a very competent, very quick, and to my mind, a very inexpensive long arm quilter, I would recommend this guy. He did a fantastic job. It came back, it's a huge quilt. It came back in a large box, priority mail, very quickly, very packed, very nicely. As soon as the day I got the quilt, he had sent me tracking information 4 or 5 days before. So the day I got the quilt, I sent him a check. He does prefer checks, which is fine. He says they're old-fashioned, but they reduce his cost for fees for credit cards, which makes a lot of sense. So I have checks. I'm old-fashioned. I have checks. So I wrote him a check very quickly, $156. I think it was the best $156 I've ever spent. I'm done my top. I'm just going to bind it. I like binding, as you know. I don't have a problem with binding. So I think one of my kids is going to get a quilt that they're going to go, oh, Mom, like, wow, look at the quilting. Yeah, look at my quilt. So don't tell them, because it's like perfect. It's like perfect. And my kids think, I do such a good job. So I'm like, oh, yeah, that quilt, wow, Yeah, that took a lot. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you guys. It's funny. I'm going to bind it now with like I say, this is a dark gray and white dot. I think I might use that. If I have it. I don't even know if I have it anymore. It was 3 years ago. So there you go. Finished is better than perfect, right? Although this is like perfect. It's like perfect. It was done on a computerized machine, not by me, with all my wonky curves and stuff. But I really like it. So anyway, shout out to David Hurd, St. Joseph, Missouri. I am beyond thrilled. I think if you want to send your stuff out to a long arm quilter, have at it with this guy. You're going to get your quilt back in like a week. He's amazing. Really, really super fast, quick, efficient, and inexpensive. So there you go. Anyway, I'm going to go bind this baby now. And I just wanted to share that with you. All right, folks. See you later. Have a good day. Bye. I am putting the binding on my quilt. that I had sent out to a long arm. And if you remember, I was saying I was going to try to see if I had in my stash, if I had any of this dark gray with a white dot left over, which I couldn't find. I had a lighter gray, but and I looked at it, this was a very bright lime green, and I really, in my sewing room, believe it or not, I didn't have any bright lime green. But what have I settled on? I love stripes. I love striped binding. I think it brings a happy touch, an unexpected touch to the edge of a quilt. So I find my navy and white striped fabric, and look how beautifully, sometimes it's hard to get blues correct. Here's my piecing, which was a navy and a navy blue with a white, and then my binding, which is, look at that, how that matches. That navy blue and the white binding. So I'm thrilled about it. So what I'm doing is I'm stitching. I cut my binding 2 1/4, which I do. I'm sewing on the back. You've seen me do binding videos. This isn't a binding video. I'm just showing you how I'm so pleased that I found that binding to go with this quilt here. So again, I got the quilt back from the long arm quilter, right? What happened? He had squared the corners beautifully. I rounded them. I just rounded my corners just gently, and I've sewn on the binding here, and as you see, I can just turn it. I keep it real loose from about 5 or 6 inches from there to there, real loose, and then I can just tuck all that in, and it just folds right over on itself and makes a beautiful curved binding. I'm very careful that you have to stitch stitch very close. Keep that same exact profile when you're stitching your binding, because it's your tendency is to pull it and stretch it, and that will make your corners, if you do it, will be cupped and it will not lay flat. So anyway, that's that. I'm using white thread. I'm back to using my white thread. I love my white thread. And, oops, I went that, yeah. And I'm using my Juki, which on the straightaways, my Juki is about 1,500 words per minute. Words per minute. That's how fast I type. No, 1,500 stitches per minute. This mechanical Juki machine. So it just flies. Not that I have to fly, I'm not rushing anything, just that it does go very quickly. But then when I come to the corners, I'll slow down, and I'll just inch my way around stitch by stitch. But on the 4 straightaways, I can really pretty much fly. I'm really pleased. Again, you see I'm using my white thread, and as you know, if you've been following me, you know that I like my white thread. But you're saying, well, there's navy and white. If you're new to this, there's navy and white. Why don't you know? Well, you can't be changing your thread navy to white every bit. So I like to use my lighter color thread on the darker blue. A lot of people would use gray. They use a neutral, which is absolutely fine. I like my white thread. I like the way it looks. I don't like the way that I wouldn't like a navy on my blue, but I don't mind the white on my. I wouldn't like a navy on my white fabric here, but I don't mind the white on my navy fabric. Just a personal preference. Like I say, a lot of people do use gray, like a dove gray, because it's a neutral and it blends. So here I am coming up to my curve. I keep everything loose. I keep everything straight. Again, that's really important, I find, in quilting. Keeping everything nice and straight right in front of you. Again, I keep reiterating the 1/4 inch seam, pressing, and I think it's so important to sit right in front of your needle. Right in front. I keep saying that. Again, I repeat myself a million times. So here I am, just bite, bite, bite. Instead of, as I was saying, the tendency would be to pull and to smooth, but like when you're binding, it's almost like you're pushing back under the presser foot and then sort of push and shove, as opposed to pull and smooth. Because if you pulled it and smoothed it, you're going to get that bowing. And I'm sticking right to the profile of the curve. I'm not coming in at all. Probably can't see that. Again, this isn't a binding tutorial, but I just thought I'd show you the binding that I've chosen. I'm really thrilled. This is a, like I was saying before, this is a Connecting Threads fabric. Now the green on the front of my quilt is a bright lime green, and even in my sewing room, I didn't have any. I have a stripe, but it's more of a, it's more like of an apple green. That didn't work. I tried just navy. It was a bit boring because the backing is this. This is almost like a Kelly green. This here. So my blue and white with the navy blue. My blue and white binding look real pretty against that, because you have to think what your binding is going to look like on the back also. A lot of people, you know, use a sheet on the back, which is fine. I like using, you know, fabric, as opposed to a sheet, because I do think, you know, okay, it's the back of a quilt, but when it's you know, cuddled up around you like this, you see the back. So I like using, again, clearance fabrics on sale for my backing. I did buy this, but Connecting Threads is an inexpensive place to buy fabric. I love Connecting Threads. It's a generous cut, buttery soft fabric. I have never been disappointed with Connecting Threads. So anyway, you'll be seeing pictures of this after I bind it. All right.